Okay, we're back in the room now. We're going to start the next session. You might notice that Lorenzo Mangani is down to be one of the presenters here, one of the 3 Lorenzos in VoIP. We've got one here. He's actually in the other room, Lorenzo Miniero. There's Lorenzo Mangani, and then the other one flies under the radar slightly because he uses the name Lens. It's Lens, a military from the Qmetrics project, Lowway. 3 Lorenzos in VoIP. And he's actually not here in physical presence, but he's loitering in the ComCon Element channel in Matrix. Matrix channels, I should say. You use Element to access it. Anyway, he's there if you want to speak to him. But we've got Alex Maitland from Gigapipe. Pleased to have him along for Adventures in RTC Observability. So I'm going to hand over to you with a big ComCon thank you. And welcome.
Thanks a lot, guys. Pleasure to be here. And yeah, Lorenzo sends his apologies. He had a slight diary clash, but any questions, whether you want to ask them live, specifically for Lorenzo and team, feel free to put them in the Element chat, or we can do it after in the Q&A. Adventures in real-time observability with qryn. So before I get started, the one question just to definitely go over is, what is Gigapipe? I'm sure everybody knows the QXIP team, but the Gigapipe team less familiar. So the telecoms market is a very familiar space. We're very well connected internally, to the point where I'm sure most people here already know each other. So first off to cover is just who we are. You probably, as I mentioned, you know Lorenzo and the team over at QXIP, the creators of Homer and Hepic. As data needs evolve, so too do suppliers. So Gigapipe is a new venture launched jointly between the QXIP team and the Gigapipe team, in order to focus specifically on reliable, scalable, and real-time observability across the telco stack. Now, observability tools individually, such as metrics monitoring, log viewers, tracing applications, they're all relatively small in scope. Teams can use them independently to gain insights into single components of larger systems, but unfortunately, they often don't communicate with each other or offer a single source of truth. Distributed platforms try to unify this, but ultimately you're still using different data layers which aren't correlated together. And this means that teams that are relying on these tools, teams that should really be working together, end up making decisions with incomplete data. This, with limited visibility, these teams have a very narrow understanding of how their decisions impact other softwares, other software components, and vice versa. So the other option is some companies go for the all-in-one completely unified observability platform. These platforms usually come with their own custom ingestion formats and a whole brand new query language to learn and to master. The issue is you end up with a system that is far more comprehensive than you need and far more complex, often with a lot of tools that you'll never actually end up using, but you're going to pay for nonetheless. These also come with massive price tags, some things that not all companies are able to afford, and the narrow understanding of how these things fit together means that when it comes to scaling, these costs increase exponentially and usually not in line with your revenue. Now, Gigapipe is a cloud-native platform designed to cater very specifically to the observability needs with a principal focus on eliminating the current issues that are facing both distributed systems and the all-in-one platforms. We've launched fully managed cloud versions of both Hepic, which is Hepic Cloud, which is specifically for VoIP and SIP capture working, as well as qryn Cloud for much broader monitoring across the sort of distributed stacks and infrastructure. We combine both the ease of use with being able to use market standards or native ingestion formats and query languages that you already know, like Loki, Tempo, Prometheus, but all with a single correlated data layer, meaning that you can use your logs, metrics, traces, and even your eBPF data all in a single place, already correlated together. So now on to something a little bit more interesting. Why is good observability so important? So to illustrate this, I'm just going to tell a little story that I learned recently. A few years ago, a small town in Alaska experienced a series of winter storms, which for them, obviously very business as usual. But this time, a rising river actually flooded the local telecommunications facility and knocked it completely offline. Obviously, due to the weather, people planned for this, so all services were switched over to the backup data center immediately. Now, unfortunately, in the backup data center, a network card then failed, which meant that during this blizzard, this village was completely cut off. Now, the main problem here is that the card had to be replaced, but obviously nobody could get to it due to the weather. Finally, a very brave soul, and this is the real hero of this story, grabbed a card, jumped on a snowmobile, and drove 200 miles to the center to replace the card and restore connectivity. Heroic? Yes, but optimal? No. This story illustrates basically how the emerging discipline of observability, using sort of new tools and data for a more complete view of your complex systems, holds the key to solving some of the challenges that telecoms are facing right now. Basically maintaining reliable services over complex networks, whether in sparse rural areas or skyscraper-littered cities. The idea is, while juggling 5G rollout and extreme weather all at the same time. In a perfect world, the backup data center, the network, or even the network card itself could have alerted the team to the potential problem long before the village got disconnected, and someone could have replaced the card when there was no blizzard. And that is essentially what observability is about. Faster, more intelligent understanding of the state of the entire network, as well as all the applications. So basically determining what kinds of observability data to use and how to move, store, enrich, and analyze that data. That will essentially help them to separate those who are going to prosper from those who will flounder. Basically, providing observability across a telecoms network means gathering and analyzing new amounts of data and hardware and software, including the relationships and the dependencies, in order to ensure service quality. It encompasses classic network monitoring logs and metrics, as well as newer tools like telemetry data and distributed tracing. The value of observability for telecoms specifically starts with the vital ability to both guarantee the right quality of service for each of your customers' requirements, as well as pricing it correctly. For example, a customer might be able to make a call or send data, but it's not optimal. The service is degraded but not gone. The provider is essentially not delivering that quality of service that's expected of them. The goal is, can the telecoms provider be proactive in looking at that across the whole network before the customer calls and asks why that call quality was so poor? Good observability means that the provider can quickly spot these problems, from jitter to packet loss to Wi-Fi interference, and zero in on a very specific line, box, subsystem application, or an individual application that's actually causing these issues. So, on-prem versus cloud. Now, cloud computing adoption has become synonymous with modernizing IT infrastructures. There are big names like Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They're all very tied to this industry, and jumping ship and abandoning the traditional on-prem deployment model is very tempting. So how do you decide what approach is best for your business? Now, the main factors that end up swaying this decision, essentially there's four. There's cost, security, control, and scalability. Cloud-based solutions, they aim to initially be far more economical. So no upfront fees, you only pay as you go, so you only pay for what you use. Users can then obviously scale their subscriptions up or down on usually tiered-based pricing that matches whatever their business needs are and how things change and evolve. There's equipment, configuration, maintenance, licensing costs. These are all baked into that subscription cost, so there's not going to suddenly be an extra thing on the bill when it comes to actual implementation. On-prem solutions, on the other hand, they cost a huge amount to deploy and maintain. And then in addition to the capital expenditures like hardware, software, and licensing, your organization is also subject to ongoing personnel and utility costs as well. So traditionally, though, cloud vendors can end up burning companies in hyper-growth phases. There was a story very recently that came out about in 2021, Coinbase, who used Datadog, got hit by a $65 million bill, which obviously was very unexpected for them. And they obviously had to pay it, but then they decided to spend millions more developing their own distributed system in-house and moving to the sort of Grafana stack on top of ClickHouse. This just highlights that not all, despite that, not all on-prem and cloud providers are the same. You're not going to run into these issues with everything. It's all about, the key here is basically pick a service and a model that is clear and concise with its pricing. Something that is especially considerate for what your business needs are now, but what they're going to be in 3 years, in 5 years, in 10 years, etc. Now, when it comes to security, cloud offers you all of that security wrapped up in the package, essentially. So no need to maintain your own systems, you don't need your own teams and infrastructure just to ensure security, as it is all taken care of for you. However, on the other hand, on-prem obviously does offer you a lot more control over exactly how your data is stored. But for most companies, the service that you're using, so long as it meets your security requirements, that tends to be far more appealing than the peace of mind and the effort of doing it all yourself. Now, in an on-prem environment, your organization controls everything, all of the hardware, the software, the data generated, essentially. Specific industries do prefer this setup because they have complete data visibility, and they can keep their exposure minimal. Now, growth is the goal of all tech companies. So your choice of infrastructure should also enable that. Now, both cloud and on-prem solutions obviously support this objective, but cloud solutions are ultimately more flexible. Your resource usage will depend on your plan, and your provider's pooled resources also ensure that you have a wider access to different ranges of capabilities. Essentially, if you need more, you can immediately opt for more. Sorry. Now, which is actually correct for you? So there is no one right answer here. Historically, on-prem has always been the choice, as sort of cloud options were more limited and more restrictive, but as more and more companies are migrating to cloud services, the option pool has grown with the demand, which means that the offerings that are there are far more, and they're far more flexible offerings as well, meaning that you have access to a wider range of solutions that probably are more likely to match your organization and their needs. Though when it comes to observability platforms themselves, a service obviously cannot monitor itself if it's down. So we have found that people have generally tended to go more towards cloud, for there are a wider range of companies in both size and complexity that will match their needs. Okay, now, why QXIP chose gigapipe, essentially. So QXIP you all know quite well, I think, as the sort of the underdog that's doing very, very well in the on-prem VoIP and WebRTC observability sector. They have thousands of deployments of Homer and Hepic, including top-tier operators and sort of world-class enterprises, giant gaming companies, all leveraging voice and video. Now, many of their customers already do deploy on the cloud themselves, but until now, there was no real ready-to-use solution for that sort of next generation of cloud and RTC companies. After a long list of failed attempts and partnerships, QXIP and Gigapipe essentially found their ideal partners in each other and decided to join forces to create a truly sort of client-centric RTC observability cloud product that's kind of ready to use immediately. Now, we designed everything from sort of the ground up, and the idea was to bridge the gap and offer very specialized SaaS solutions designed for, but not necessarily limited to, the telecom and real-time communications market. Now, our cloud versions of Hepic and qryn, they offer essentially new levels of access to the full spectrum of observability features, both from the past, so VoIP and PCAPs, as well as the future, so focusing on logs, traces, metrics, etc. All at once, and all with instant correlation as well as integration. And they obviously all come with the features that you expect from the QXIP products, pretty much out of the box with zero setup complexity. You essentially send the traffic, we do the rest. So when transforming an on-prem technology, though, into a cloud service, it's very, very important to build something that fixes an actual problem and essentially offers something that people actually need. Some products that are first built and then they hunt for someone to sell them to, they do generally miss the mark when it comes to what people are actually looking for and essentially what people are going to be happy to pay for eventually. When building Hepic Cloud, we listen to the users and just to make sure that you gain all of the benefits of moving to cloud without any of the pitfalls that typically come with it. So you can see here, it's fully encrypted, secure HEP ingestion, real-time call and session tracking, real-time RTP and RTCP media reports, programmable extract and correlation, as well as OAuth 2 support, and bring your own BYOC storage, essentially meaning you can bring your own data layer if you really want to have complete control of where that data is stored in a more hybrid setup, meaning that you retain that sort of data with all the benefits of cloud as well. So, working at scale. So is it this suitable for sort of SMEs or more the enterprise side of things? Now, scaling distributed applications is a very tedious job, especially at large scale. And it's very important for observability to be an asset rather than a liability. Now, our assets were designed and thoroughly tested to sustain real-life observability in both dev and production for some of the largest operators and companies in the world at the moment. And right now, QXIP and Gigapipe can offer that same value and technological sort of excellence back down on the smaller scale for sort of SMEs and startups as well. Essentially, deploy anywhere in an instant and you're pretty much ready to go. Whether you're ingesting 20 gigabytes a month or a terabyte a day, a system that can grow with you and performs at any scale was pretty much core to what we built. So, for example, one of our largest individual RTC deployments, they span 20 plus different regions, monitoring voice quality and activity for over 150 million concurrent users through Janus. So, when is clear observability important for us? So whether you are operating a small VoIP business or one of the largest infrastructures in the world, your observability stack is essentially what allows you to ensure not just the ability to ship software fast, but also to maintain the service to your clients that you pride yourselves in, that they expect from you. By removing the barriers to using advanced and comprehensive observability systems, The idea is to enable everyone, regardless of size, to start off on the right foot and then continue that way. No more headaches, no more consultants to choose sort of the best agents, the correct data format, the API integrations. We're trying to make the world sort of as flat as possible when it comes to complexity by supporting sort of the growing variety of different vendor formats, that's essentially the competition, without locking our users into any specific one. Like essentially a vendor locksmith, we're trying to allow customers to change their mind to continuously improve their observability coverage by letting them mix and match both technologies and different vendors, something that typical providers have tried to keep as ring-fenced as possible. That mentality of the drop-in replacement, which is also counts as the drop-out replacement, is pretty much core to everything that a good observability platform should be doing. Okay, so just to sum up very quickly, observability is an absolute necessity for everyone, not just those with giant budgets. We would always say pick a provider whose cost and features will also scale with your, not just your business, but also your growth, and don't overcomplicate. Use a service that is already compatible with the formats and languages that you already know how to use. Don't take on a whole new system that you're going to have to learn and master from day one. The idea is not to lose any competence and parity that you have pre-migration. And on-prem versus cloud, again, each has its benefits. It depends entirely on your situation. But we actually even find these days a lot more people are going more of a hybrid setup, so half and half. So you can have sort of your data layer contained completely on-prem, and then you're using the cloud service as well. Just very quickly, so as I said, everything around what I've kind of talked about is about using a service pretty much instantly. Everything is based around free trials, no cards required. The whole idea is if you're unsure, give it a go. And the way that everything drops in, it means you can be up and running in sort of 10 minutes from start to finish using your existing infrastructure and just replacing the various bits. So yeah, essentially that's from gigapipe and QXIP. I do have some time for any questions. As I said, Lorenzo's also on the chat if you had some more specific ones for him.
We certainly do have time for questions. So who has the first? We've got Alex here. We've got Alistair, who's also a co-founder and the CEO of Gigapipe, as well as Lorenzo in the chat. So who's got a question here? Tori, by the look of things. Here we are, Tori.
qryn, how do you pronounce it actually?
So, qryn.
qryn.
So think of it as like querying.
Okay, qryn. So that would be like a drop-in replacement for a Prometheus server, and that, and also it wasn't clear from your presentation. You can self-host it. You don't have to actually go and you get a cloud subscription.
So for qryn, there is an open source version. In fact, most services that we offer do have open source versions, which you absolutely can run yourselves. Obviously, various feature differences and things like that. But yes, qryn, essentially, the idea is to kind of create a polyglot observability tool that replaces it. It basically acts exactly the same way as Loki, as Prometheus, as Tempo, that you can completely drop in, and then it's not just sort of ingestion format agnostic, but also query as well. So however you currently query your stack, the idea is you can unify all these into a single host. It then puts all your logs, metrics, and so are you using sort of more than just like Prometheus and Loki at the moment?
Okay.
Yeah, you can basically put them all into a single data layer, so correlating that data together is much, much easier.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Thank you, Tori. Next question for any of these Gigapipe folk in the room. Okay, it looks like people are, there you go. Evan at the back there. The mic is coming your way, Evan.
Mostly a question about logging in general. Would you say that the solution you have is good for ingesting just generic logs, log searching, aggregation, stuff like that, along with metric data to combine those into sort of a combined data set you can query at the same time and sort of correlate across?
Yeah, so the problem right now is just a lot of people, if they're using a specific tool for their logs, another one for their metrics, they sit in separate data layers. It's very difficult to actually get a whole picture of what's going on to say, right, I have my log now, I now want to see the traces or the metrics directly from that log. The idea with querying is that because we essentially have a little transpire in the middle, so everything comes in their various different formats. You don't have to change a thing. It then converts it all into a readable format internally, stores that in ClickHouse, so it's super fast to read it back, but it automatically means correlating those things together is far, far easier because they are all in one place, all in the same format, and it means when you actually query them back, you can still query them in the exact same, both your metrics and your logs, and whatever languages you're using right now, query them in the exact same way, but because it will come from that single source, you'll get the correlation between the layers.
Is there any kind of throughput limitation in terms of like dumping stuff in there? I know ClickHouse is a fast backend storage mechanism, but if you're shipping logs from a variety of very chatty services, Is there an indexing time? Like, is there some sort of delay in the timing on that, or?
No, yeah, so everything is essentially in real time. The way it's designed, we have proxies and different sort of, we actually separate readers and writers specifically in each, depending on which region you're in. We have basically a global load balancer, so it'll realize where you're from and where your data's stored, and then it'll hit the proxy will hit the correct reader, the correct writer, and then it'll all go straight in. But no, then obviously all of the infrastructure automatically scales with the demand as well.
Rock on.
Are you feeling satisfied there, Evan?
I am extremely satisfied.
I can tell by your eyebrow positions that you're suitably impressed, aren't you? Yes.
Very.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. Any other questions here? Okay, in that case, it means that you're going to get let out slightly early for lunch. Don't forget that we're back in here at 2:20 for the lightning talks. Alistair is still here. Alex is still going to be here. So if you want to talk to these people individually, you'll be able to do that. But for now, let's give them all a very big ComCon thank you.
Cheers, guys.
We'll see you back at 2:20.